Well, thank you. It's actually wonderful to be here. When Gabriel invited me and mentioned that he was playing in his jazz band and he wanted to introduce his book, I thought that sounds an absolutely wonderful scenario. And so I wanted to first of all say to congratulations to Gabriel for the publication of this book. So very well done, very well done. I think it's kind of interesting that Gabriel gave that little summary of how the book came about, this kind of sales pitch on his life and career, and I think there's a kind of there's a curious way in which I think our subjectivity can escape us very often, just when we think we're being trapped by this sort of very, unpleasant demand to sell ourselves as smart and as having sorted out all the questions in the world. It's just at that point, actually, that we come to realise that we're not who we thought we were after all. And I think there's something remarkable about what I like about this book is precisely that it's the opposite of this tendency nowadays. I don't know if it's spread here to Slovakia, but certainly in the UK nowadays, we encourage our PhD students, for example, to give very short presentations, just 2 minutes long, and to sell their PhD and to sell what they're going to do in just a few seconds so that it's absolutely compelling, as if they were on a sort of TV host show, where you have to sell something to business minds, and there are lots of virtues to this discipline, but it leaves me slightly worried, because my experience of being a PhD student was I was full of doubts. The last thing I knew when I embarked upon my PhD was precisely what my question was. And we kind of put our PhD students, but not just our PhD students, we as academics have to sell ourselves to the media, have to sell ourselves to grant bodies, have to sell ourselves and so on, in a way that obliges us to pretend a certainty that conceals the kind of lack that lurks beneath the surface. And as Basha was translating then, it occurred to me, in the UK we have this terrible disease. Everything has to be turned into an acronym. So University College London has to be UCL, the Open University has to be the OU. Even a 3-letter acronym has to be a TLA. And we have this acronym which we, again, encourage our students and our colleagues to stick to, and that is to be smart. And smart means, if I can remember properly, it means to be specific, to deal with something that is measurable, to only say things that are assignable to one category or another and not blurry in between those categories. The R, I think, in smart is realistic. Must be realistic. And the T is sort of time relevant, that you can do it within a nice, specifiable, finite period of time. And in a sense, what I like about this book is it's exactly not smart. So, in fact, I think this is a book that took probably 30 or 40 years in the gestation, right? And this idea that we might actually understand as academics exactly, precisely what our problem is at day one, I think is a fallacy. Or maybe it applies in certain areas. Maybe it's very important in certain disciplines. But certainly in a discipline like social psychology, part of the problem is grappling with what it is that is your question. And it takes a long time and a lot of bravery, I think, to wrestle with what is your question. And I think that Gabriel comes to a question, comes to his problem, and he sums up his problem with this word, subjectivity. Subjectivity is the nature of the problem. And specifically, the idea of figurations of subjectivity. That we know what subjectivity is vaguely. It might mean it's not quite objective in the way that psychology should be. It's to do with us as experiencing human beings, as subjects. It's a very difficult concept to define, but the idea of figurations gets at the idea that our subjectivities are always tied up with and patterned by the society that we're part of and the discursive processes that we're called by. And the subtitle, Figurations of Human Subjectivity, a contribution to second-order psychology. This, again, I think I'm particularly proud of this because I've tried to keep alive this idea that I think originates in cybernetics, where they realised in the 1960s when they were trying to build robots that they had to understand that they had to build something that could itself observe the world. So they coined this idea of second-order observation. So we as scientists are observing our subject matter, but what we need to do is observe the fact that our subject matter is itself observing the world. So we're second-order observers. And also we're second-order experiencers. We try to experience what it is that our research participants are experiencing. And in a certain way, we can't. We can't observe somebody else's observations. We can't experience somebody else's experiences. And so as the book concludes, there's a very nice conclusion of the book. I'm not going to say too much about it because it will be what we call a spoiler. You know, you're going to want to read the book. But I think the conclusion of the book plays on this paradox that precisely because we can't observe somebody else's observations, precisely because we can't experience somebody else's experiences, so we have to work out ways of talking to one another so that we can come to some sort of agreement. And so there we go. That, I think, is the question that Gabriel comes to as the question. I'm inclined, having expressed my doubts about being smart, we need some other sort of acronym that will get what this book is trying to do. And I wonder if we could call it something like WISE. It's wise in the sense that it's wide. The eyes, I think, maybe it's intense, it's imaginative, it's intelligent. So take your pick for the I. The S, it's synthetic. Instead of breaking things up into parts and being preoccupied with the fact that once we've broken something into parts, actually we can't then put it together back again because it's not a machine. And so we're left with the need for synthesis. The S could be something like it's synthetic. It's looking at the unity of things. And E, I think probably the E would have to be experience. It's experienced. It takes seriously the fact that subjectivity is something that goes on throughout our lives, and that the process of learning and educating ourselves and educating others is a long and slow process, even in our lifetimes, and a long and slow process in terms of societal change as well. So I would say that this book is not smart, but it is wise.